The dog hit the porch just before dawn, dragging half a chain through the snow. Dane Mercer found her curled against his father's front door, her coat white with ice and her belly heavy with unborn pups. Someone had cut the tracking chip from beneath her skin. Someone else was already driving up the mountain to claim her. Dane had 48 hours before he was due back with his SEAL team, but the dog looked at him as if she had chosen the only house left where someone might refuse to let her disappear. What she carried into that storm would uncover a betrayal 3 years in the making. Stay with us to find out what it was. The dog hit the porch just before dawn, dragging half a chain through the snow. Dane Mercer heard the metal before he heard the animal. It scraped once across the bottom step, stopped, then scraped again beneath the wind. He was awake on the living room floor, still wearing the thermal shirt and work pants he had slept in because the bedroom at the back of the house smelled too much like his father. Pipe tobacco in the curtains, cedar soap in the closet. The faint medicinal trace of the oxygen machine the county had removed 2 days before Dane arrived. The house had been quiet for 36 hours. Dane had expected the quiet to help. It had not. He rolled to one knee, reached for the flashlight beside his folded jacket, and waited. The storm pressed against the old windows. Snow hissed through the pine branches. Somewhere beneath it came another short drag of metal, followed by a dull thump against the porch boards. Dane crossed the room without turning on a lamp. It was habit, not fear. His hand found the brass lighter in his pocket, and his thumb rolled it once against his palm before he let go. The lighter had not held fuel in 20 years. His father had carried it aboard a destroyer in 1978 and later used it to start birthday candles, brush piles, and the wood stove after every winter power outage. Dane pulled the curtain aside by 2 inches. At first, he saw only snow packed against the railing. Then a dark shape moved beside the front door. He unlocked the deadbolt and opened the door no farther than the safety chain allowed. Cold air knifed across the floor. The porch light revealed a German shepherd lying against the threshold, one foreleg tucked beneath her chest, the other stretched toward the step as if she had run out of strength mid-crawl. Her coat had once been a deep sable. Now the guard hairs were rimed white, and clumps of ice hung from her belly. A broken length of chain trailed from a narrow collar. The metal had cut a raw groove through the fur at her neck. The dog's eyes opened. They were amber, clouded with exhaustion, but fixed on him. Dane removed the chain from the door and stepped outside. The wind came around the north side of the house, hard enough to push snow beneath his bare feet. He barely felt it. He crouched several feet from the dog and kept his hands where she could see them. "Easy," he said. One of her ears twitched. The other folded slightly at the tip, a small notch missing from its edge. "You made it this far. Don't spend what's left trying to bite me." The dog tried to lift her head. A low warning rolled from her chest, more duty than threat. Then her muzzle dropped back to the boards. Dane looked at the chain. The final link had been twisted open, not cut. Dried blood marked the collar. Beneath the ribs, the dog's abdomen swelled heavily. Pregnant, he thought. Close. He had treated hypothermia in men pulled from black water, and he knew enough not to throw heat at a body that had gone too cold. Rapid warming could shock the heart. Movement could do the same. He backed into the house, found the wool blanket from the couch, and returned with it held low. The dog watched every step. When the blanket touched her hindquarters, she snapped weakly at the air and dragged herself several inches away. The chain caught between 2 porch boards. Her panic arrived faster than her strength. She twisted claws, scraping breath, rasping through her teeth. Dane dropped the blanket and said the first thing that came to him, "Stand down." The dog froze. Not calmed, not comforted, frozen in recognition. Dane felt the change run through her body. Her ears shifted forward. Her eyes searched his face with a terrible, practiced attention. He did not repeat the command. He lowered himself to sit on the top step shoulder, turned away so he would not face her directly. "All right," he said. "You know words. That's something." He waited through a full minute of wind and snow. The dog did not move. Dane slid the blanket across the boards inch by inch. This time she allowed it to touch her side. He covered her back but left her head exposed, then worked the trap chain free without pulling the collar. When he reached near her shoulder, his fingers found a patch of bare skin beneath the wet fur. A small incision had been closed badly and torn open again. He leaned closer. The wound sat exactly where a microchip might have been removed. The dog's lip lifted. "I saw it," Dane said. "I'm done looking." He went inside and brought back a canvas firewood sling. It took him 10 minutes to coax the sling beneath her without forcing her onto her side. Twice she tried to rise. Twice her legs folded. On the third attempt, Dane placed one forearm under her chest and the other beneath her hips, careful of the swollen belly. She weighed less than she should have. He carried her through the front door. Inside, he laid her on the braided rug 6 feet from the wood stove. The fire had burned low, so he fed it 2 split birch logs and opened the damper. He filled hot water bottles from the kitchen tap, wrapped them in towels, and placed them near her chest and groin without touching bare skin. Then he covered her with another blanket and checked the color of her gums. Tupala. Her breaths came shallow and fast. Dane found his phone on the mantel and called the only veterinary clinic listed in the binder his father kept beside the refrigerator. The call rang 6 times before a woman answered with a voice rough from sleep. Calder Veterinary. "My name is Dane Mercer. I'm at 114 Loon Road. I found a pregnant German Shepherd outside. Severe cold exposure. Possible dehydration, open wound near the left shoulder." There was a pause. Bed sheets moved on the other end. "How responsive is she?" Eyes track. Weak, defensive response. Recognized a command. Temperature. "I don't have a rectal thermometer. Do not use the ear thermometer from the bathroom. It won't tell us anything useful." "Is she shivering?"
No. The woman's voice sharpened.
"That's not good. The county plow won't reach Loon Road until late morning, and my truck won't clear Miller Pass in this. Warm her slowly. No heating pad. No rubbing her legs. Give her a teaspoon of warm water every few minutes if she can swallow, but don't pour it into her mouth. Can you come when the road opens?" "I will. What's your father's name?" Dane looked toward the dark hall. "Walter Mercer." The pause, this time, was different. "Walter died last month," the veterinarian said quietly. "3 weeks ago. I treated his old hound for years. I'm sorry." Dane turned the brass lighter in his pocket. "Thank you."
"Mr. Mercer, listen to me."
"If that dog starts having contractions, call again immediately. Do not try to move her unless the house is in danger. And check whether there's any identification on the collar. The collar's nearly cut through her neck. Then don't remove it yet. Swelling can hide damage. I'll bring clippers and fluids." The dog stirred when Dane ended the call. He knelt beside the rug with a metal bowl and dipped 2 fingers into warm water. She smelled them but did not lick. He touched a drop to the side of her mouth. Her tongue moved once. "That's enough to start," he said. He had spoken more to the dog in 15 minutes than he had spoken to anyone since arriving in Maine. The thought irritated him, though he could not have said why. He sat with his back against the couch and watched the rise of her ribs. Every 5 minutes he offered water. Every 10 he checked her gums. At some point she began to shiver. It was violent, almost painful to watch, but it meant her body was producing heat again. Dane added a log to the fire. The room brightened. Above the mantel hung a photograph of Walter Mercer standing beside the same porch in 1996. Dane was 12 in the picture, thin and unsmiling, holding a fishing pole he had begged for all winter. His father had one hand on Dane's shoulder and the other resting on the head of a black and tan hound named Buck. Dane had planned to take the photograph down before leaving. He had planned to sort the tools in the barn, sign the estate documents, meet the realtor, and be back in Virginia before anyone from his team had reason to ask whether he was ready to return. A clean sequence, 4 days in, 4 days out. That was before the storm. Before the dog. His phone vibrated. The message came from his senior chief. "Weather's moving south. Confirmed travel plan by 1800. Need you back no later than Friday." Dane typed, "Road currently closed. Tracking Friday arrival." He did not mention the dog. On the rug, she lifted her head and looked toward the hallway. The movement was so sudden that Dane turned with her. Nothing stood there. Only the narrow passage leading to his father's bedroom and the back door beyond it. The dog sniffed the air.
"Once, twice."
Then she tried to stand.
Easy. Her front legs locked, but her rear legs trembled.
She took 1 step toward the hallway and collapsed. Dane caught the blanket before it slid from her back. "What is it?" The dog stared past him. He listened. The house creaked as the wind pressed against the siding. Water clicked in the baseboard pipes. No footstep. No engine. Then he heard a faint metallic tap from the mudroom. The dog's chain, he realized. He had left the broken end on the porch, but a second piece remained attached to her collar. It had struck the brass tag hidden beneath the wet fur. Dane eased the tag into view without moving the collar. It was not a standard pet tag. It was a rectangular strip of blue anodized aluminum, badly scratched and cut through one corner. Most of the stamped text had been ground away. 3 characters remained.
R17. On the back was a faded symbol resembling a house roof over a star.
The dog watched his hand. When he released the tag, she pushed her nose beneath the blanket and turned away. "You know what that is, too," Dane said. He took a photograph of the tag and another of the shoulder wound. Then he texted both to Dr. Calder with a short note. Possible chip removed. Any local registry use blue metal tags marked R17. The response came 2 minutes later. Not county issue. Don't post publicly yet. Too many people may claim her. Dane looked at the dog. Somebody already did something they didn't want traced. Her eyes closed. He should have called the sheriff then. The rational part of his mind knew it. The injury near the chip site, the chain, the pregnancy, the unexplained identification tag, none of it belonged in the hands of a man on funeral leave, with a return deadline. But Dane had spent the last 3 weeks discovering how many things could be done properly and still be done too late. The hospice nurse had called his command. His commander had approved emergency leave. The airline had found him a seat. Snow in Norfolk delayed the flight. A mechanical issue in Boston delayed the connection. By the time Dane reached the hospital in Portland, his father's bed was empty, and the room had been cleaned. Every system had worked as designed. His father was still dead. Dane set the phone face down. He fed the stove and remained beside the dog. Near 7, gray light began to gather behind the windows. The storm had not weakened, but the world outside changed from black to white. Snow climbed halfway up the porch railing. The pines across the road bent under the weight. The dog had stopped shivering. Dane checked her gums again. A little more color. Her breathing had slowed. He offered water, and this time she licked his fingers 3 times before turning her head.
Good. Her tail moved once beneath the blanket.
It was not a wag, more like a muscle remembering its purpose. Dane went to the kitchen and opened his father's pantry. Canned beans, oatmeal, tuna, 2 jars of peaches, and a row of dog food cans left from Buck. Though Buck had been gone 9 years, Walter had never thrown away anything that might still serve a purpose. The expiration date on the dog food had passed by 4 years. Dane chose tuna instead, rinsed it in warm water, and carried a small portion to the rug. The dog smelled it immediately. Hunger sharpened her face, but she would not eat while he held the plate. He set it down and moved back. She did not touch it. Dane turned his face toward the fire. Behind him came the soft scrape of a plate. Then another. He waited until the sound stopped before looking. The tuna was gone. "All right," he said. "You like privacy." The dog's amber eyes stayed on him. A gust shook the front windows. She flinched, not at the noise, but at the rattle of the collar chain against the floor. Her breath quickened. One paw came up toward her neck. Dane moved slowly, took a dish towel from the coffee table, and wrapped the loose chain so it could not strike the tag. The dog watched him do it. When he finished, she lowered her paw. Something blue protruded from beneath her chest. At first, Dane thought it was the metal tag. Then the dog shifted and revealed a narrow strip of woven nylon caught in the fur behind her front leg. He pinched the end and pulled gently. A 6-inch length of blue leash slid free. One edge was dark with old blood. The material had been cut cleanly, but near the clasp, someone had stitched a name in white thread. Most of it had frayed away. Only 2 letters remained.
TH? The dog raised her head?
Dane held the fabric near her nose. She smelled it once, then pressed her muzzle against it so hard her eyes closed. He did not need training to understand grief. "Whose was it?" he asked. The dog kept her face against the strap. At 8:15, an engine labored somewhere below the hill. Dane stood before he consciously decided to move. The dog heard it too. Her head came up. Her ears flattened. A tremor ran through her body that had nothing to do with cold. The engine grew louder, tires spinning, catching spinning again. No county plow would come from that direction. Miller Pass lay east. The sound climbed from the South Access Road, the unmaintained route marked private on every map. Dane crossed to the window and lifted the curtain. A dark pickup emerged between the pines, with a steel livestock box mounted in the bed. Snow covered the license plate. An amber light flashed on the cab roof, throwing dull pulses across the white trees. The truck stopped at the bottom of the driveway. For several seconds, no one got out. Dane looked back at the dog. She was trying to crawl behind the couch. Her nails dug into the rug. The blanket tangled around her rear legs. A low sound came from her throat, not a growl this time. It was smaller than that. Dane had heard men make that sound after explosions when they were awake, but not yet back in the room. He moved between her and the door. The truck door opened. A man in a dark parka stepped into the snow. He was broad through the chest, perhaps mid-50s, with a gray beard cut close and a canvas folder tucked beneath one arm. He climbed the driveway without hurrying, as if he had been to the house before. Dane checked the deadbolt, then moved the dog into the short hallway where the front windows could not see her. She resisted until he showed her the blue strap. She followed it 2 weak steps and lay down beside the wall. "Stay," he said softly. Her eyes met his. The recognition was there again. 3 knocks struck the door. Not the uncertain knock of someone asking directions. 3 measured blows with the side of a fist. Dane opened the door 6 inches and kept his body in the gap. The man smiled without warmth. "Daniel Mercer." "Who's asking?" "Victor Hale, Homefront Guardians." He raised the canvas folder. "I'm sorry about Walter. He and I had our disagreements, but I respected the man." Dane said nothing. Victor looked past him into the house. "I believe one of my dogs came up this way during the night." "What makes you believe that?" "Tracks from our south kennel. Broken chain. 6-year-old sable shepherd, female pregnant." His smile tightened. "She's valuable, but more important, she's medically fragile. I need to bring her back." Behind Dane, a floorboard creaked. Victor's eyes shifted toward the sound. "What is her name?" Dane asked. "Ember." The dog in the hallway did not move. Dane watched Victor's face. "Call her." For the first time, the man hesitated. Then he leaned closer to the opening. "Ember." The response came at once. A chain rattled against the wrapped towel. The dog scrambled backward, hit the wall, and began to pant. Victor heard it. His expression changed not to concern, but calculation. "There she is," he said. "You did the decent thing bringing her inside. Now open the door." Dane did not move. Victor drew a set of papers from the folder and held them where Dane could see a state registration number, a photograph, and the name Homefront Guardians printed across the top. "She's my property. I can have the sheriff here as soon as the road's clear." Dane glanced at the photograph. The dog pictured on the page had the same notched ear, but the blue tag on her collar was different. And in the photograph, there was no scar near the shoulder. Dane looked back at Victor. "Then call the sheriff." The smile left Victor's face. "You don't understand what you're involving yourself in." "Probably not. She could lose the litter if she isn't under professional care." "A veterinarian is coming." Victor's eyes hardened. "Which one?" Dane did not answer. The wind drove snow between them. Victor folded the papers and returned them to the canvas folder with careful hands. "Walter had a habit of seeing crimes where there were only hard choices," he said. "I hope you didn't inherit it." Dane felt the brass lighter beneath his fingers. "My father knew you." Victor stepped back from the door. "Better than was good for either of us." He turned toward the truck, then stopped halfway down the steps. Without looking back, he said, "That dog belongs to me, Chief Mercer. By noon, you'll have paperwork proving it. By sunset, I'll have her back." The title landed harder than the threat. Dane had not introduced himself as military. Victor continued down the driveway. The pickup reversed slowly, the livestock box swaying behind the cab. As it disappeared into the storm, Dane closed the door and stood with one hand on the lock. The dog remained pressed against the hallway wall. He crouched several feet away and laid the blue strap on the floor between them. "Ember," he said. Her body tightened. Dane waited. Then he tried the 2 remaining letters stitched into the fabric. "Ruth." The dog's ears rose. He said it again, softer. "Ruthie." She looked directly at him. Not past him, not toward the door. At him. Then she dragged herself forward, placed one paw over the blue strap, and lowered her head beside it. Dane looked through the front window at the tire tracks already filling with snow. Someone had removed the dog's chip. Someone had cut away her name. And the man who claimed to own her knew Dane's rank, his father's history, and exactly where to find them before the county roads had opened. On the rug, Ruthie's sides tightened beneath the blanket.
Once, then again.
Not a full contraction. Not yet. But close enough that Dane reached for the phone. Before he could dial, it rang in his hand. The caller ID displayed the Franklin County Sheriff's Office. By the time Sheriff Eli Rollins reached Loon Road, the storm had buried Victor Hale's tire tracks and turned Dane's driveway into a white trench. The sheriff came on a county snowmobile with a red medical sled hitched behind it. He was 62, square-bodied and wrapped in a faded green parka that made him look more like a game warden than a lawman. Snow clung to his gray mustache. He removed his gloves before entering, stamped his boots twice on the porch, and looked at Dane as if measuring both the man and the doorway. Daniel Mercer.
Dane, your father called you Daniel, even when he was mad.
You knew him well. Well enough to know he stayed mad longer than necessary. Rollins nodded toward the hallway. Where's the dog? Dane did not move aside immediately. The hesitation lasted less than a second, but Rollins noticed it. If I came to take her, the sheriff said I wouldn't have brought a veterinary sled. Dane opened the door wider. Ruthie lay beside the wood stove, now wrapped in 2 blankets, with her head resting on the blue leash fragment. Her breathing had steadied. When Rollins entered, she watched him without lifting her head. The sheriff crouched at a respectful distance. "That's not Ember," he said. Dane looked at him. "You know the dog. I know Hale's dogs. Ember is redder through the shoulders and has both ears intact. His paperwork has this dog's picture. That doesn't mean the name is right." Rollins took out his phone, photographed Ruthie's notched ear collar and shoulder wound, then stood. Hale called dispatch at 7:58. Reported a stolen breeding female. Said your father had a history of interfering with his operation. My father has been dead 3 weeks. I mentioned that.
And he said, grief can make sons continue their father's grudges.
Dane felt his jaw tighten. Rollins noticed that too. You always look like you're about to break a chair, or is that just for me? I don't break furniture. Walter said, you were literal. The sound of another engine came from the road. A dark blue utility truck pushed through the drift behind the snowmobile chains, striking the wheel wells.
Dr. June Calder climbed out with a canvas medical bag, a folding stretcher, and the expression of someone who had already argued with 3 people before breakfast.
She was in her late 50s, lean with silver hair braided down the back of her coat. She stepped into the house, saw Ruthie, and forgot to greet either man. "Oh, sweetheart." Ruthie's ears shifted at the softness in her voice. June knelt, allowing the dog to smell the back of her hand. She did not touch the collar first. She checked the eyes, gums, pulse, belly, and paw temperature, speaking quietly through each movement. Body temperature is 96.8. Better than it could be. Dehydrated. Bruising along the lower abdomen. Mammary tissue says this is not her first litter. How many? Dane asked. June's fingers moved carefully over the stretched skin. No honest answer without records. More than his kind, certainly. Ruthie flinched when the veterinarian reached the left shoulder. June parted the fur and swore under her breath. "Chip pocket," she said. "Removed?" Rollins asked. "Not surgically. Dug out." She glanced at Dane. "You cleaned this? Warm saline? Nothing else?"
Good June clipped fur around the wound, flushed it, and applied antibiotic gel.
Ruthie endured the treatment with rigid silence until the scissors touched the collar. Then she jerked hard enough to knock the bowl over. Dane moved forward. June raised one hand. "Don't grab her." He stopped. Ruthie backed against the couch, eyes wide, the loose chain striking the floor despite the towel wrapped around it. Dane sat down where she could see him. "Stand down," he said. Her breathing changed. June looked from the dog to Dane. "That's not an obedience response." "What is it?" "Training memory. Maybe fear memory. Hard to know yet." She waited until Ruthie lowered her head, then cut the collar in 2 places without pulling it over the ears. Beneath it, the skin was cracked and raw. A faint band of white scar tissue circled the neck below the fresh injury. "Old collar damage," June said. This dog has been tethered before. Rollins photographed it. Ruthie turned her face into the blanket. June gave subcutaneous fluids, listened to the fetal heartbeats, and counted under her breath. How many? Dane asked. At least 5. Maybe 6. Heart rates are present, but 2 are slower than I like. She needs imaging and monitoring. Can she travel? Not down Miller Pass today. The road will shake her apart. Rollins leaned against the mantel. Hale says he has a heated kennel and a staff technician. June looked at him over her glasses. Hale's staff technician quit 6 months ago.
No.
A woman named Marin Holt. She called me twice about breeding records and then stopped answering. Dane turned toward Rollins. You knew this. I knew there'd been a labor dispute. I did not know about breeding records. That's convenient. The sheriff's face cooled. Careful, son. I'm not your son. No, Walter made that clear often enough. The words struck before Dane could guard against them. Rollins saw it and looked away first. June continued taping the fluid line to Ruthie's foreleg. This isn't helping the dog. Dane sat back. The veterinarian worked in silence for several minutes. Ruthie watched every movement, but when June covered the injection site with gauze, the dog reached forward and touched her nose to June's wrist. There you are, June whispered. Ruthie withdrew immediately, as if she had revealed too much. A knock came at the door. Victor Hale did not wait to be invited before stepping onto the porch. He had returned without the livestock truck, this time in a black SUV with a plow blade and a younger man in a Homefront Guardians jacket. Victor held a plastic folder above the snow. Sheriff, he called. I brought the original registration and veterinary authorization. Rollins went outside to meet him. Dane followed as far as the doorway. Victor opened the folder and presented a state kennel certificate, breeding contract, vaccination record, and transfer form. Each document listed the dog as Ember, 6 years old sable German Shepherd identifying mark, notched left ear. The photograph matched Ruthie. The transfer form bore a signature from a kennel in Pennsylvania. June came to the door, pulling off her gloves. This animal is hypothermic, dehydrated, wounded, and at risk of premature labor, she said. Whatever the papers say, she does not move today. Victor's expression softened in a way Dane distrusted more than anger. Dr. Calder, I understand how this looks. Ember panics in storms. She broke a chain during loading and ran. We searched all night. With a removed chip, June asked. Victor glanced toward the dog. A growth formed around it. We had it taken out last month. Who performed the procedure? Our contracted veterinarian. Name?
Dr. Paul Venn.
June's eyes narrowed. Paul Venn lost his main license 2 years ago. He consults across state lines. He cannot perform surgery here. Victor closed the folder. I didn't say he did. The younger man beside him shifted his weight. He had a shaved head, a narrow face, and a fresh scratch running from his cheek to his jaw. Ruthie saw him through the open doorway. She surged to her feet. The fluid line pulled loose. Blood spotted the gauze. She barked once sharp and explosive, then backed so fast she struck the wood stove guard. Dane crossed the room and placed himself between her and the door. The younger man looked down. Dane saw something caught beneath the man's left boot, a short twist of blue nylon, the same weave as Ruthie's leash. You handle the dogs? Dane asked. Victor answered for him. Owen Pike manages transport. Owen wiped his boot against the porch board, dislodging the nylon into the snow. Ruthie's bark turned into a growl. Dane did not look away from Owen. How did she cut your face? Owen's hand rose to the scratch. Tree branch. In a livestock truck. Victor stepped between them. Chief Mercer, you're exhausted and grieving. That does not give you the right to accuse my employee. You knew my rank before I gave it. Your father spoke about you. He didn't speak to me. Victor's eyes held his. That doesn't mean he didn't speak about you. For one dangerous moment, Dane wanted to grab the front of Victor's coat and demand every word Walter had ever said. He felt the old instinct gather in his shoulders, the belief that pressure produced answers, if applied correctly. Ruthie's breathing rasped behind him. He let his hands remain open. Rollins stepped between the men. Enough. Here is what's going to happen. The dog remains under Dr. Calder's emergency care until the road is safe.
Mr. Hale will submit proof of ownership. Mr. Mercer will not hide, move, or alter the animal.
I will contact the State Animal Welfare Office and verify the chip removal explanation. Victor's jaw tightened. My facility is licensed. So is a funeral home, Rollins said. Still doesn't mean I leave a breathing person there. June almost smiled. Victor looked past them at Ruthie. Emba. The dog pressed closer to Dane's leg. Victor saw it. Something naked and resentful crossed his face before the pleasant expression returned. She has always been reactive, he said. That is why she was never placed with a veteran. Dane looked at the blue leash fragment near Ruthie's paw. Then, why does somebody's name appear to have been stitched on her leash? Victor did not answer immediately. Snow ticked against the porch roof. Finally, he said, our donors personalize equipment. It encourages attachment. Whose attachment? Victor closed the plastic folder. By this afternoon, the paperwork will settle that question. He turned toward his SUV. Owen followed without looking at the dog. At the bottom of the steps, Victor paused beside Rollins. Sheriff, I would appreciate a private word. You can say it here. Victor lowered his voice anyway. Homefront Guardians places dogs with men and women who have already sacrificed enough. Public accusations could cost us funding. If Mercer turns this into one of Walter's campaigns, veterans will pay for it. Dane heard every word. So that's the choice, he asked. Your reputation or their dogs? Victor looked back.
No, the choice is whether adults accept that saving lives requires compromises.
The SUV pulled away 10 minutes later. Rollins remained on the porch watching until it vanished behind the trees. He'll get an emergency civil order, the sheriff said. Based on false records. Maybe. But records are evidence until someone proves otherwise. Dane stepped inside. Then prove otherwise. I need facts, not a dog's reaction and your intuition. The chip was removed. June can document cruelty. That does not establish ownership. The transport manager had her leash under his boot. Did you photograph it? Dane looked toward the porch. Wind had already covered the blue thread.
No, then I have your statement.
Rollins put on his gloves. Do not make this harder by acting like jurisdiction is an obstacle course. Dane's voice dropped. You think I'm going to take her? I think you came home too late for one living thing and now you're looking at another. The room seemed to lose heat. June stopped packing her bag. Rollins's expression showed instant regret, but he did not take the words back. Dane touched the brass lighter in his pocket. Get out. The sheriff left without arguing. June waited until the engine of the snowmobile faded. He was cruel, she said. He was accurate. That is not the same thing. Dane knelt beside Ruthie and reattached the fluid line. His fingers remained steady. June watched him. You cannot fix your father's death by winning custody of this dog. I know. Do you? Ruthie nudged the blue leash fragment beneath her chest. Dane did not answer. At noon, the county plow reached the lower road but failed to clear Miller Pass. June decided to remain at the house rather than risk the descent. She established a temporary treatment area in the dining room, then used an old handheld scanner to search Ruthie's body for a second chip. Nothing. She examined the blue tag again. R17 could be a litter code, she said. Or a donor file. Can you trace the symbol? I'll send it to a colleague in Augusta. Dane's phone vibrated with another message from his senior chief. Flight options limited. Confirm Friday arrival by 1600. He looked at the time. 12:23. June noticed. You have to leave. Friday. Today is Wednesday. I know. You cannot drive out until tomorrow at best. I know. And if the dog goes into labor, I know. June folded her arms. You are a difficult man to have a conversation with. My father said that. Often. Dane looked at her. June lowered her eyes to the medical bag. Walter worried about you. He had an unusual way of showing it. He kept every article that mentioned your unit, even the ones that did not name you. He had a map in the kitchen drawer with pins where he thought you might be. Dane glanced toward the drawer beneath the wall phone. He had not opened it. Why? He asked. Because worrying is sometimes the only work left to a parent who cannot help. Ruthie shifted on the rug. Her forepaw stretched toward Dane's glove, which he had left near the stove. She hooked one claw through the cuff, dragged it beneath the blanket, and laid her head over it. June smiled faintly. She has chosen collateral. What? Something that smells like you. In case you disappear. Dane looked at the dog, then at the unopened kitchen drawer. At 2:17, Sheriff Rollins called. Hale filed in district court through an emergency magistrate, he said. He has registration breeding records and a sworn statement that Walter Mercer unlawfully interfered with Homefront guardians before his death. What kind of interference? He claims your father removed documents from their office. Did he? I don't know. And the order. A temporary return order may be signed by morning. State welfare says the dog can be transferred if a veterinarian certifies transport. June won't. Hale says he has another veterinarian. Dane looked through the dining room doorway. June was asleep in a chair beside Ruthie, one hand resting near the dog's blanket. What happens if the paperwork is fraudulent? Then we prove it afterward. After he takes her. A pause.
Yes, Dane ended the call.
He stood alone in the kitchen, listening to the old refrigerator cycle on. The sensible course was clear. Preserve evidence. Cooperate. Let the sheriff and animal welfare officers work. Return to his command. Trust the system to correct itself. He opened the drawer beneath the phone. Inside lay a folded road map, a box of thumbtacks, and an envelope addressed in his father's handwriting. Daniel, if you ever come home long enough. Dane stared at the words. He did not open the envelope. Instead, he took the keys to the barn from the hook beside the door. The barn stood 30 yards behind the house, connected by a narrow path Walter had once kept, shoveled. Now the snow reached Dane's thighs. He carried Ruthie in the firewood sling, while June followed with the medical bag, protesting every step. This is medically unnecessary, she said. It's heated. It is a barn. It has a propane line and better insulation than the house. What are you doing? Keeping her out of sight. June stopped in the snow. The sheriff told you not to move her. He told me not to remove her from the property. That is the kind of answer people give immediately before being arrested. Dane continued walking. Inside the barn, Walter had converted the old tack room into a workshop. A propane heater stood against one wall. Heavy curtains covered the windows. Dane cleared the workbench, spread blankets on a foam camping pad, and transferred Ruthie beside the heater. She sniffed the air, then turned in a slow circle despite her weakness. Her nose stopped at the bottom cabinet beneath Walter's tool rack. She scratched once at the wooden door. Dane opened it. Inside were 3 empty binders, a camera, and a stack of blue metal tags, identical to the one on Ruthie's collar. Each tag bore the same roof and star symbol. The numbers ran from R4 to R29. June stared at them. Your father did more than interfere. Dane picked up one tag. On the back, Walter had written a date and a single word in black marker. Dead. Ruthie pushed her nose against tag R17. Then she looked toward the barn door. A vehicle stopped outside. Not Victor's truck. This engine was lighter, rougher, and close enough that whoever had driven it knew the hidden path behind the house. Dane turned off the propane heater so he could hear. A woman's voice called through the storm. Walter, it's Marin Holt. Please tell me you found Ruthie. The woman outside kept one hand raised where Dane could see it, and the other wrapped around a red plastic fuel can. She was short, broad-shouldered, and close to 60, with snow packed into the seams of her brown work coat. Her glasses had fogged over. A dark knit cap covered most of her hair, but several gray curls had escaped around her ears. Walter, she called again. Dane opened the barn door 3 inches. Walter died 3 weeks ago. The woman lowered the fuel can. For a moment she appeared to forget the storm, the cold, and the armed-looking stranger blocking the doorway. No, she said. Dane had heard that single word from enough families to know it was not disbelief. It was refusal. The mind trying to deny a fact before the fact could enter the body. I'm his son. Daniel. She removed her fogged glasses and wiped them with a sleeve. He said you were deployed. He was usually right about that. She looked past him. Did he find her? A soft sound came from behind the workbench. The woman's face changed. Ruthie. The German shepherd lifted her head so quickly that June reached for the fluid line. The dog stared at the doorway. The woman dropped to her knees in the snow. Ruthie, she said again, and this time the name broke in the middle. The dog struggled upright. Dane stepped aside. Ruthie crossed the tack room in 3 uneven steps. Her rear legs nearly failed, but she kept moving until her muzzle reached the woman's hands. Then she pressed her whole face into them. Maren Holt made no attempt to hug her. She only held her palms open and allowed the dog to decide the distance. Ruthie smelled each wrist, then shoved her nose beneath Maren's sleeve and exhaled. "Oh, girl," Maren whispered. "They told me you were gone." Ruthie leaned against her. June disconnected the fluid line before the tubing pulled free. Dane closed the barn door and relit the heater. Maren remained on the floor with snow melting beneath her knees. Ruthie settled against one thigh, her amber eyes half closed. "You know this dog," Dane said. "I helped train her. For Victor Hale." Maren flinched at the name. Before it became what it is now. She looked around the workshop and saw the blue tags on the bench. The color drained from her face. "Where did you get those?" "My father kept them. He said he had proof, but he never told me what." "Proof of what?" Maren touched Ruthie's notched ear with one finger. "That dogs were disappearing inside Homefront Guardians." June pulled an empty stool across the room. "Start at the beginning." Maren sat, but kept one hand where Ruthie could reach it. "Victor founded the program 11 years ago. At first, he did good work. I mean that. He took shelter dogs nobody wanted, evaluated them, and paired the right ones with veterans. He could look at a dog for 5 minutes and tell whether it needed work quiet or a person to belong to. "What changed?" Dane asked. "Money, or fear of losing it." Homefront Guardians had expanded after a national news feature. Donations rose, then expenses rose faster. Victor bought land, hired trainers, promised placements to more veterans than the program could support. When 2 grants were not renewed, he began breeding dogs instead of rescuing them. At first it was 1 litter, Maren said. Then 3. Then he started keeping females that should have been retired. Ruthie. She was never supposed to be bred. The dog's eyes opened at her name. Maren swallowed. Ruthie was trained for Eleanor Price. Navy communications specialist, retired. Panic episodes, balance, problems, nightmares. Ruthie could brace, retrieve medication, interrupt dissociation, and wake Eleanor without startling her. Dane looked at Ruthie's swollen belly. "What happened?" 3 years ago, Victor said Ruthie died during transport to a specialty clinic in Pennsylvania. Heat stroke, he claimed. He sent Eleanor ashes. June stopped writing. "In winter?" she asked. Maren nodded miserably. The transport date was in February. That should have exposed him immediately. It should have. I was doing payroll then, not animal records. The death certificate came from a clinic I didn't recognize. Victor said the van heater malfunctioned. Dane picked up tag R17. "Why these retirement tags?" R meant removed from active placement. The number connected to an internal file. Removed how? Retired, transferred, dead, unsuitable. Victor wanted one code because donors never saw the difference. June looked at the stack. "There are 26. Maren nodded. Walter thought at least 9 were false deaths. "How did my father get involved?" "He came to volunteer after Buck died. Victor liked having a Navy father around. Good for photographs. Walter repaired fences, drove veterans to appointments, and asked questions nobody expected from an old man in a flannel shirt. Dane could picture it. His father standing in a kennel office, pretending not to understand while remembering every number in the room. Maren continued. He noticed retired dogs were listed on feed invoices months after their supposed deaths. Then he found transport mileage that did not match the clinic destinations. Did he steal records? He copied them. I gave him access. You were the source. I tried to be. Her hand tightened on her knee. She had reported the breeding volume to the board chair 18 months earlier. The email went through Homefront's internal server. Victor intercepted it, printed selected messages in which Maren complained about overtime and convinced the board that she was retaliating over reduced hours. He moved me from animal care to bookkeeping, then cut my access to kennel files, she said. I sent photographs to the state welfare office. They scheduled an inspection. Victor moved every questionable dog 2 days before they arrived. How did he know? June asked. Someone at the office called him. Maybe as a courtesy. Maybe because he had donors on the advisory panel. Dane's voice hardened. And you stayed. Maren met his eyes. I stayed because leaving would have made him the only person inside who knew the numbers. I stayed because Ruthie was already gone, and I thought I might stop it happening again. You didn't.
No, the answer carried no defense.
Ruthie lifted her head from Marin's leg and looked at Dane. June said quietly, "Neither did anyone else." Dane turned away and walked to the barn window. Snow blurred the house into a pale shape. He knew he was being unfair, but unfairness felt cleaner than grief. If Marin had acted sooner, if Rollins had investigated harder, if Walter had told him, if Dane had answered one of the calls he had postponed, each thought created a world in which the ending changed. Behind him, Ruthie shifted. A glove landed against his boot. Dane looked down. It was his right glove, the one she had taken from the house. Ruthie stood several feet away, weak but alert tail held low. She had carried it through the snow in her mouth, while Dane brought her to the barn. Now, she nudged it toward him. Marin gave a tired laugh. She used to do that with Eleanor's slippers. Only the left one, never the right. Dane picked up the glove. Ruthie watched him, then glanced toward the blue leash fragment on her bedding. He understood. An exchange. He set the glove beside the strap. Ruthie lay down with both objects between her paws. The small absurdity broke something open in the room. June laughed first. One short breath, she tried to hide. Marin wiped her eyes. Even Dane felt the corner of his mouth move. For 5 minutes, nobody discussed death certificates or court orders. June warmed broth on a camp stove. Marin fed Ruthie from a spoon while Dane found an old biscuit tin and discovered that Walter had filled it with dog treats long after Buck died. The treats were stale enough to damage a table leg. Ruthie ate one anyway. She has terrible judgment, Dane said. Marin looked at him over her glasses. She came to your porch. June laughed again. Dane allowed the moment to remain. Then Marin saw the envelope protruding from his coat pocket. Walter's handwriting. Dane took it out. Daniel, if you ever come home long enough. He told me he was writing to you, she said. He had my number. He said numbers let people hang up. Dane turned the envelope over. It was unsealed. Inside was a single sheet of paper and a small brass key taped to the bottom. Daniel, if you are reading this, either I finally lost the argument or you finally came home. Check the false bottom beneath my bench. Do not take what you find to Victor. Do not take it alone to the board. Go to Eli even if you are angry with him, especially if you are angry with him. There are dogs listed as dead that I believe are alive. Marin tried. Do not punish her for failing where I also failed. The last line was written more heavily than the rest. And do not turn this into another mission you can complete without letting anyone stand beside you. Dane read it twice. Marin kept her eyes on Ruthie. June pretended to reorganize medicine. The brass key opened a narrow lock beneath the center drawer of Walter's workbench. Dane removed the drawer and found a plywood panel with 2 recessed screws. Beneath it lay a black ledger, a flash drive, and a stack of photocopied transport forms. The first page of the ledger listed tag numbers, dog names, veteran names, declared outcomes and suspected locations. R17, Ruthie Eleanor, Price reported, deceased possible breeding annex. Beside the entry, Walter had drawn 3 small marks. A crescent, a torn ear, 2 finger snaps. What do these mean? Dane asked. Marin pointed to Ruthie's right rear leg. Beneath the sable fur was a pale crescent-shaped streak. Eleanor used to identify her by that mark. And the snaps. Her release cue. Marin raised her hand, hesitated, then snapped twice. Ruthie immediately lifted the blue strap and placed it in Marin's lap. June exhaled slowly. That is not coincidence. Dane turned to the transport forms. Several listed dogs as deceased at a Pennsylvania veterinary clinic. Each had the same authorization signature.
Dr. Paul Venn.
Mileage records showed the home front vans traveling north, not south on the dates the dogs supposedly left Maine. Where north? Marin leaned over the ledger. Victor leased an old logging property near Jackman. He called it a winter conditioning site. Breeding annex. I never saw it. Owen drove there. Ruthie growled at the name. The reaction confirmed another piece. Dane photographed every page, then handed the ledger to Marin. She backed away.
No, you know the codes.
And Victor has already accused me of theft. Then, explain them to Rollins. Marin looked toward the barn door. Eli didn't believe me the first time. Did you show him this? I didn't have this. Dane heard his father in the wording of the letter. Go to Eli, even if you are angry with him. He reached for his phone. Before he could call, June held up one hand. Listen. Engines approached from both directions. A snowmobile came from the front road. A heavier truck climbed the rear access path. Doors opened. Men's voices carried through the storm. Sheriff Rollins called from outside. Dane opened the barn. I have a signed order and 2 state animal welfare officers with me. Ruthie rose, placing herself between Marin and the door despite the tremor in her legs. Marin whispered. He found the magistrate. Another voice followed Rollins's. Victor Hale. Ember, he called.
Come Ruthie back toward Dane.
The barn handle turned. Dane looked at the ledger, the flash drive, and his father's letter. Then he looked at Ruthie. The order outside might be legal. The ownership documents might be false. The evidence in his hands might change everything, but not before the door opened. 3 hard knocks struck the wood. Dane Rollins said, Do not make me break your father's door. Dane opened the barn door before Rollins could knock again. Snow swept across the threshold and curled around his boots. Sheriff Rollins stood at the front of a small group. 2 state animal welfare officers in navy jackets. Victor Hale, Owen Pike, and a thin man carrying a veterinary case. Victor held the court order inside a clear sleeve. Rollins looked past Dane and saw Ruthie standing beside Marin. Everybody keep their hands where I can see them, he said. No one here is armed, Victor replied. Rollins did not look at him. That was not addressed only to you. Dane stepped outside and pulled the door nearly closed behind him. I have evidence the ownership records are false. You can show me after we execute the order. Show you now. Rollins's voice dropped. Dane, the magistrate, ordered the dog returned to the registered owner pending review. The order specifically states you concealed and relocated the animal after being directed not to. I moved her 30 yards for heat and privacy. Victor raised the plastic sleeve. He obstructed access. Dane ignored him. My father documented at least 9 dogs reported dead that may have been transferred to an unregistered site. That made one welfare officer look at Victor. Rollins held out his hand. Give me the documents. Dane did not move. The sheriff's face changed slightly. You called me here. Hand them over. Dane had imagined this moment during the seconds before opening the door. He would show the ledger. Rollins would recognize the pattern. The welfare officers would suspend the return order. Victor would lose control of the situation. Instead, Dane heard his own question before he had decided to ask it. Who told Victor you were coming? Rollins stared at him. Victor answered. My attorney received notice because I am the petitioner. And Owen Dane asked. Why is the transport manager at a medical transfer? Owen shifted beside the truck. The thin veterinarian opened his case. I am Dr. Samuel Baird. I have certified the dog fit for controlled transport. You haven't examined her, June said from inside the barn. Baird glanced toward the voice. I reviewed the records provided. Records written by the man trying to take her. Victor lifted both hands. This is exactly the chaos the order was meant to stop. Dane felt the group arranging itself around a version of events in which he was the unstable element. Grieving son, active duty operator, hidden dog-locked barn. Every fact that had seemed protective in isolation now formed a pattern against him. Rollins kept his hand extended. The ledger, Dane. Dane turned and reached through the doorway. Marin handed him the black book, but her grip remained on it a moment longer. Tell him about the transport mileage, she whispered. I will. He gave the ledger to Rollins. Victor's eyes fixed on it. That belongs to Homefront Guardians. It belonged to Walter Mercer, Dane said. It contained stolen proprietary records. Rollins opened to the first page. Then I suppose we'll have plenty to discuss. Victor stepped forward. Sheriff, the order concerns my dog. Allegations about business files are separate. One welfare officer, a woman named Lauren Pike, who was not related to Owen, read over Rollins's shoulder. These entries list dead dogs at a northern property. Walter invented theories, Victor said. He confused retirement codes with mortality records. Marin came to the door. I entered those codes. R17 was Ruthie. Victor looked at her with practiced sorrow. Marin, you were terminated for unauthorized access and financial irregularities. I was terminated yesterday. I haven't worked there since July. You retained passwords. You never changed them. The second welfare officer asked Rollins to hold the ledger flat so he could photograph 2 pages. For a brief moment, Dane believed the balance might shift. Then, Doctor, Baird said, the dog is in active distress. Ruthie had begun panting inside the barn. She stood with her head low, circling once on the bedding before stopping near Dane's glove. June knelt beside her. She's anxious because 6 strangers are crowding the door. Or she is beginning labor, Baird said, which is why she should not be moved. Baird opened the order. Attached to it was a veterinary transport authorization bearing his signature. I have a heated vehicle, oxygen fluids, and a whelping enclosure at the licensed facility. June's mouth tightened. Do you also have the previous breeding records? I am not here to litigate.
No, you're here to certify a dog you haven't touched.
Rollins stepped between them. The court order is valid. I can delay only if there is an immediate medical emergency that makes transport likely to kill the animal. June looked down at Ruthie. Dane knew what she was being asked to do. Not whether transport was unwise. Not whether Victor had harmed the dog. Whether death was likely during a 20-minute trip. June listened to Ruthie's heart, checked her gums, and palpated her abdomen. The dog flinched but did not cry out. Her temperature is up, June said finally. Fetal heart rates are stable enough. I oppose moving her, but I cannot honestly say the trip itself is likely to kill her if she is monitored. Victor exhaled. Dane felt anger flash toward June before he could stop it. She saw it. Do not ask me to lie for you, she said. I didn't. You wanted me to. Ruthie pushed her nose beneath Dane's glove and held it there. Rollins folded the order.
Mr. Hale will take custody.
Welfare officers will follow the transport and inspect the dog on arrival. The ledger and flash drive remain with me as evidence. Marin, you'll provide a statement at the station. Victor gestured to Owen. Dane stepped into the doorway. Owen does not touch her. The transport manager stopped. Victor said, You do not set the conditions. I will carry her to the vehicle. Rollins considered it, then nodded. That's reasonable. Victor's expression showed that he disagreed, but did not want to argue in front of the officers. Dane returned to the tack room. Ruthie watched him approach, reading the people behind him in every movement. He crouched and showed her the canvas sling.
Easy. She looked toward the barn door, then back to him.
Marin sat beside the bedding. Ruthie 2 taps. She tapped her knee twice. The dog leaned against her, trembling. Dane slid the sling beneath Ruthie's chest and hips. She allowed him to lift her. The blue strap remained in her mouth. Outside, Victor's heated transport truck waited with its rear doors open. The interior held a clean steel enclosure, padded with towels. It looked professional. That was part of the problem. Cruelty was easier to recognize when it arrived dirty and shouting. Ruthie saw Owen near the doors and twisted in Dane's arms. Back away, Dane said. Owen looked to Victor. Do it, Rollins ordered. Owen moved 10 feet away. Dane carried Ruthie to the truck. Snow landed on her muzzle and melted in the warmth of her breath. She pressed the blue strap against his chest. At the enclosure, she refused to release it. You keep it, Dane said. Victor reached for the strap. That is facility property. Dane turned his shoulder between them. Rollins said, let the dog have the leash. Victor's hand dropped. Dane laid Ruthie inside. She tried to follow him when he withdrew his arms, but the welfare officer closed the gate. The latch clicked. Ruthie struck the bars once with her paw. Dane placed his palm against the steel from the outside. Her paw met it through the gap. For several seconds, neither moved. Then Owen closed the truck doors and the contact disappeared. Victor approached Dane while the others secured equipment. You think you saved her, he said quietly. You found a cold dog and decided the whole world was a rescue operation. Dane looked at him. What happened to Eleanor Price? Victor's eyes narrowed. That was enough. She is alive, then, Dane said. Victor recovered. I don't discuss clients with strangers. You sent her ashes. The pleasant mask slipped again. Walter told you that. My father knew more than you thought. Your father knew pieces. Pieces make old men feel useful. Dane stepped closer. Victor did not retreat. Be careful, Victor said. You have a career that depends on judgment. Right now, every person here has watched you ignore an order, conceal property, and intimidate witnesses. How many reports do you think your command needs before grief becomes a fitness concern? Dane's hands remained at his sides. What do you want? I want you on a plane Friday. And the ledger. Let the sheriff discover what Walter discovered, that running a program means making decisions people on the outside cannot bear to see. Victor walked away. The transport truck pulled out first. The welfare officers followed in a state SUV. Victor left behind them. Rollins stayed with Dane and June beside the barn. Marin stood in the doorway crying without sound. Rollins held the ledger under his coat. I need all three of you at the station as soon as Miller Pass opens. Dane watched the red taillights vanish in blowing snow. You delivered her back to the man who cut out her chip. I executed a court order while preserving the evidence you gave me. You could have refused, and Hale's attorney would have replaced me with a deputy who knew nothing about the ledger. You always have a reason. Rollins's face hardened. So do you. Yours just wears a uniform. Dane turned on him. The sheriff did not back away. You want the truth, Rollins said. Walter called me 11 times about Homefront. 11. He had suspicions, copied invoices, half a license plate, and no living animal I could place before a judge. I asked him to wait until we had enough for a warrant. He decided waiting was cowardice. And you decided procedure was courage. I decided evidence collected illegally could collapse the whole case. What case he died before you opened one? Rollins looked older then.
Yes, the admission stopped Dane.
I should have opened one, the sheriff said. I thought I had time. Snow gathered on the ledger's plastic cover. Dane looked away first. Rollins continued. Your father's last call came the night before his stroke. He said he had found the breeding annex. I told him not to go alone. He told me you had taught him that waiting for backup was how people arrived after the work was done. Dane's throat tightened. I never told him that. You didn't have to. Rollins climbed onto the snowmobile. I will call the magistrate with the new evidence. I will ask for an immediate hold on transport and a warrant for both properties. Until then, you stay here. Dane said nothing. The sheriff started the engine. And open your father's whole letter, Rollins called over the noise. Walter never wrote only one page. He drove away. Inside the barn, Dane checked the envelope. His fingers found a second sheet caught in the lining. It contained no investigation notes. Only a few lines. Daniel, I was angry because missing you was easier than admitting I was proud of a life that kept taking you away. That is my failure, not yours. If you come home after I am gone, leave the porch light on once before you go. I would like to imagine you still know where home is. Dane sat on the workbench stool. The brass lighter rested in his palm. He opened and closed the lid until the small metallic click filled the room. June stood near the door. You did what you thought would protect her. You hid her. That made Victor's documents stronger. You were afraid. I was certain. That is often the same thing in different clothing. Marin wiped her glasses. Victor will move her. The welfare officers are following him. He'll show them the public kennel. Ruthie won't stay there. How soon? Marin looked at the storm. As soon as he thinks the road north is open. Dane took out his phone. 3 missed calls from his senior chief. 1 voicemail. He played it on speaker. Mercer, your travel. Confirmation is overdue. Call me now. This is no longer a scheduling question. Dane stared at the screen. His return flight left in 31 hours. If he missed it without authorization, the consequences would be real. Not dramatic. No immediate court-martial, no cinematic disgrace. A documented failure of judgment. Loss of trust. Questions about readiness. Possibly removal from the upcoming rotation. The work that had defined his adult life could begin narrowing because of one decision made in a barn in Maine. He called. Chief Mercer, his senior chief, answered. Tell me you have a route out. The pass should open tonight. Then you travel tonight. I may need a delay. For the estate. Dane looked at the empty bedding where Ruthie had been. For an active animal cruelty investigation. Silence. Are you law enforcement now?
No, then why are you essential?
Dane could have said he possessed unique skills. He could have described the storm, the evidence, the dog's condition, the risk of flight. All would have contained truth. None would have answered the question. I'm not sure I am, he said. Then get on the plane. The call ended with an order to confirm travel within 2 hours. Dane lowered the phone. Outside, the storm began to thin. The sky, over the western ridge, lightened by a shade. Marin's phone rang. She answered, listened, and went pale. What? Dane asked. It's Lauren, the welfare officer. Victor denied them access to the private kennel wing. He says the court order covers custody, not inspection of proprietary breeding space. Where is Ruthie? They saw her placed in the public clinic. Then the power failed. Victor ordered everyone outside because of a propane alarm. June grabbed her coat. That facility has a backup generator. Marin kept listening. Her eyes lifted to Dane's. The generator came on after 12 minutes. When they went back inside, Ruthie was gone. Dane was already moving toward the door. Marin caught his sleeve. Eli said, "Stay here." Dane stopped with his hand on the latch. The old choice stood in front of him, familiar and immediate. Go alone before permission arrived, or trust people who had already failed. He closed his eyes once. Then he stepped back and called Rollins. The sheriff answered on the second ring. "Ruthie is missing from the public kennel," Dane said. "I am not moving until you tell me where you need me." Rollins breathed out slowly. "Stay on the line." At Homefront Guardians, 11 miles away, Ruthie lay inside a dark transport crate beneath the private breeding building. The first true contraction tightened through her body. She scratched at the wooden floor.
Once, twice.
Beneath the plank, something metal answered with a hollow knock. Rollins did not tell Dane to stay home. He told him to bring Walter's map, the copies of the transport forms, and anyone who could explain the codes. Then he ordered him to meet at the sheriff's substation in town, not at Homefront Guardians, and not at the northern property. It was the first instruction Dane had received all day that acknowledged what he could contribute without pretending he had authority he did not possess. He followed it. Miller Pass opened at 6:20 under an orange line of sunset. Dane drove Walter's old Ford, the '94 model, with the cracked passenger mirror and a heater that worked only when the truck climbed. June sat beside him with the medical kit on her knees. Marin rode in back, holding the black ledger copy against her chest as if Victor might reach through the rear window and take it. The sheriff's substation occupied 2 rooms behind the Rangeley Fire Department. Rollins had already spread maps across the conference table. Lauren Pike and the second welfare officer, Tomas Reed, stood beside a laptop. A state police lieutenant listened by speakerphone, while a prosecutor from Augusta reviewed photographs of Ruthie's wound and Walter's records. No one looked rested. Rollins pointed at Dane before he could speak. "You are here as a witness and a source of local information. You do not enter either property unless I direct you. You do not pursue a vehicle. You do not conduct surveillance. Understood." "Understood." Marin looked at him in surprise. Dane ignored it. Rollins turned to the table. "Hale claims the dog was moved to an off-site emergency clinic after the propane alarm. No clinic within 70 miles has received her." "Because she is beneath the private breeding building," Marin said. Lauren leaned forward. "You have seen a lower level, only on an old construction invoice." Victor called it feed storage. "The public plans show a slab foundation, but we paid for drainage pumps and heat lines below grade. Why didn't you tell us during the inspection?" "I never entered it. I had an invoice and suspicion." Rollins slid a copy of the ledger toward her. "Now we have Walter's note saying lower wing next to 3 R codes." The prosecutor's voice came through the speaker. "That may support an amended warrant, but I need a connection between the alleged false death files and a living animal at risk." Dane placed the blue tag photograph beside the ledger entry for R17, notched left ear, crescent mark on right rear leg. Response to the name, Ruthie, and a 2-snap release cue, all documented by 3 witnesses. "Response to a name is not identity," the prosecutor said. Marin opened Walter's folder, then used the placement photograph. She found a photocopy of Eleanor Price kneeling beside Ruthie on the day of certification. Ruthie wore a blue leash stitched in white. The enlarged image showed more of the name than the torn fragment Dane had found. Ruthie A. Price. June added her photographs of the scar where the chip had been removed. Lauren said, "If we can locate Eleanor Price and confirm the original chip number, we connect the living dog to the death report." Marin looked down. Eleanor stopped answering my calls after Victor told her I had falsified Ruthie's training hours. Rollins typed the name into a state database. She lives in Farmington, 48 miles south. Dane looked at the storm map. Another band of snow would reach them before midnight. Phone.
Disconnected.
The prosecutor said, "Someone needs to make contact in person." Rollins looked at Lauren. "You and Reed stay on Homefront's public facility. If Hale moves another vehicle, document it." "I'll take Marin to Farmington," Dane said. "She may not open the door for law enforcement with a stranger beside you." Rollins gave him a tired look. "And she will for you."
No. But she might for June.
Veterinarian older woman, no uniform. June raised an eyebrow. "Thank you for the age assessment. You know what I mean."
I do. I am deciding whether to forgive how you said it.
Rollins considered the route. Dane drives. June and Marin make contact. I follow. The plan was simple, legal, and built around several people doing one part each. Dane disliked how much relief that gave him. They reached Eleanor Price's house at 8:15. It stood at the end of a plowed lane, a small white bungalow with a ramp leading to the porch and a Navy flag frozen stiff beside the mailbox. One lamp burned behind the front curtains. June knocked. No answer. She knocked again and called Ms. Price. "My name is June Calder. I'm a veterinarian from Rangeley." The porch light came on. A shadow moved behind the curtain, but the door remained closed. Marin stepped forward. "Eleanor, it's Marin Holt. I know you have no reason to trust me. I should have come sooner." A woman's voice answered through the door. "You sent me a sympathy card." Marin closed her eyes.
Yes, you wrote that Ruthie had been loved until the end.
"I believed she was dead. You worked for the man who killed her." Marin swallowed. "I worked for the man who lied to both of us." The lock turned. Eleanor Price opened the door but kept the chain engaged. She was 71 tall despite the cane braced against one hip, with close-cropped white hair and a face that showed no interest in being protected from bad news. "What are you saying?" June held up her phone with a photograph of Ruthie on Walter's rug. Eleanor's cane slipped. Dane caught it before it hit the porch. She stared at the image. "That was taken yesterday," June said. "She is alive." Eleanor made a sound too soft to be called a cry. Her fingers searched for the chain but could not find it. Dane opened the door only after she nodded. Inside the living room contained no photographs of family. It contained photographs of one dog. Ruthie beneath a hospital bed. Ruthie wearing a red service vest. Ruthie standing beside Eleanor at a Navy reunion. On the mantel sat a polished wooden urn with a brass plate. Ruthie, faithful beyond words. Eleanor lowered herself into a chair. "Where is she?" Dane knelt so he would not stand over her. "Victor has her. We believe she is at the private kennel or being prepared for transport north." "Why is she pregnant?"
No one answered quickly enough. Eleanor looked at Marin.
"How many times?"
"We don't know." The old woman's hand tightened around the cane. "Then, find out." June showed her the notched ear, the crescent marking, and the cut leash. Eleanor touched the screen with one fingertip. "I stitched that leash after she chewed through the first one." She hated being tied to anything. "Do you have her original records?" Rollins asked. Eleanor pointed toward a roll-top desk. "Victor collected the official file when she supposedly died. I kept copies because the Navy taught me never to surrender the only copy." Inside the desk were Ruthie's training certificate, vaccination history, and original microchip registration. The chip number matched a crossed-out line on one of Walter's transport sheets. Marin covered her mouth. Rollins photographed every page and sent them to the prosecutor. Eleanor watched him. "Will that bring her back?" "It gives us cause to treat the death record as fraud and the dog as stolen property." "Will that bring her back tonight?" Rollins did not lie. "I don't know." Eleanor stood with difficulty. "Then there is something else." She walked to a cabinet and returned with a small audio recorder. "Ruthie was trained to respond to my episodes. Victor required monthly video checks. 3 months after he told me she died, I received a voicemail with no caller identification. All I could hear was a generator and a dog scratching. Then 2 snaps. "Why didn't you report it?" Dane asked. "I did. Victor told me grief was making patterns out of noise." She pressed play. Static filled the room. A diesel generator pulsed in the background. Metal rattled. A dog scratched repeatedly against wood. Then came 2 finger snaps. Ruthie barked once. Marin leaned toward the recorder. That is the annex generator. It misses every 7th cycle. Dane listened again. 6 steady pulses. A skipped beat. Then another 6. What was beneath the private breeding building, he asked. An old veterinary surgical room, Marin said. Victor said it flooded and was sealed. Could a dog hear the generator from there? Yes, Rollins's phone rang. The prosecutor had obtained the amended warrant. The room shifted into motion. Rollins called state police. Lauren and Reed were ordered to hold the public entrance. A second team headed for the lower wing. Dane handed the keys to Walter's truck to June. You're not going, she asked. Rollins told me not to enter. You're learning. I dislike it. Eleanor took the blue leash fragment from Marin. Bring this to her. Marin looked at Rollins. The sheriff nodded. You can identify the lower access. Stay behind, officers. Eleanor turned to Dane. And you. I'll remain at the road command post. She studied him. Ruthie trusts you. I think she tolerated me. She carried your glove, June said. Eleanor's expression softened by a fraction. Then she trusts you. Dane looked toward the urn on the mantel. I'm sorry. For what? For arriving after this was done to her. Eleanor tapped the cane once against the floor. Do not make my dog suffering another place for you to punish yourself. It belongs to her. Help her with it or step aside. The words were not gentle. They were useful. At 10:20, the convoy reached Homefront Guardians. Dane remained in Rollins's vehicle at the road command post with Eleanor and June. Snow had begun, again fine and dry. Blue lights flashed against rows of kennels. Over the radio, officers announced entry to the private wing. Victor's attorney protested. A door was forced. Marin's voice guided them down a service corridor. The storage room is behind the wash station. Look for a floor drain that runs uphill. It doesn't make sense unless there's another level. An officer found a steel hatch beneath rubber mats. The bolt had been locked from below. Dane leaned toward the radio. A ram struck metal once. Twice. The hatch opened. Voices descended concrete stairs. Then Marin said, there are cages? 6 dogs. No, 8. June covered Eleanor's hand. An officer called for veterinary support. Rollins's voice came next. We found breeding records, sedatives, chip extractors, and cremation tags. Eleanor closed her eyes. Dane asked into the radio Ruthie. Static. Then Marin answered, her crate is here. Dan ist tot. But she isn't. The crate door hung open. Blood and clear fluid marked the bedding. Ruthie had scratched a floorboard loose. Beneath it, officers found the blue metal tag from her collar and a recent tire invoice for Victor's livestock truck. Lauren's voice broke over another channel from the public gate. Black transport vehicle just breached the north fence. Driver is Victor Hale. 1 passenger, believed Owen Pike, heading toward Route 16. Rollins ordered units to intercept. Dane unfolded Walter's map across the hood of the cruiser. Route 16 led west, but the main road was already closing under the new storm. Victor was not fleeing toward town. He was heading for the old logging corridor and the Jackman Annex. June checked the time. If Ruthie's fluid has broken, she may have hours. Less if a pup is obstructed. The radio reported that Victor had passed the first junction before state police arrived. Eleanor held the blue leash fragment with both hands. The twist was no longer a theory. Ruthie was the dog Victor had declared dead. The false death certificates extracted chips, retirement tags, and hidden cages were real. But Ruthie remained locked inside Victor's moving truck. Her labor had begun, and the only road between her and the northern annex was disappearing beneath snow. By 11, Victor's truck had disappeared beyond the last working traffic camera on Route 16. State police established a roadblock near Stratton. A second unit moved north from Eustis. The storm erased visibility between them. Dispatch tracked every county plow, fuel truck, and private vehicle still moving, but no one reported the black livestock box. Dane stood at the command table inside the Homefront office, while officers carried evidence from the lower wing. He had not crossed into the restricted kennel area. Rollins had made the boundary clear, and Dane held it even while every instinct told him motion was better than waiting. Marin spread Walter's transport records beside a road atlas. Victor won't use the main route to Jackman, she said. The way station camera would catch him. He already crossed the north fence, Lauren replied. There are only 2 maintained roads. Maintained, Dane repeated. He opened Walter's old map. Handwritten circles marked abandoned logging roads, fuel depots, and 3 bridges. One route left 16 near a shuttered sawmill, crossed Crown Lake, and rejoined the highway 20 miles north. Rollins shook his head. That road has been closed since the washout. To public traffic, Marin said. Homefront paid a snow contractor there last winter. Why? She searched the ledger and found a fuel invoice coded JA, the annex generator. Dane traced the route with one finger. Victor doesn't need the whole road. He needs the old timber bridge across Alder Cut. If it holds, he bypasses both roadblocks. Rollins called the state units. The first response came back 5 minutes later. A trooper reached the sawmill junction and found fresh tire marks entering the closed road. The second response arrived 30 seconds after that. The trooper's cruiser had slid into a ditch while turning. No injuries, but the road was blocked behind him. Victor had passed the only unit close enough to intercept. The room went silent. That was the failure Dane had feared, the kind created not by incompetence, but by weather distance and one man willing to risk more than everyone pursuing him. Rollins looked at the map. The bridge is 12 miles from here by snowmobile trail. 8 from Walter's hunting cut, Dane said. You know it. I walked it with him when I was 16. That was 26 years ago. The terrain has not moved. The timber may have... Dane met his eyes. You need someone at the east side of Aldercut before Victor reaches it. Rollins considered the storm beyond the windows. You are not law enforcement. No, you do not engage him. No, you observe, report, and keep the bridge closed if you can do so without confrontation. Dane nodded. Rollins pointed at Lauren. You go with him. Lauren checked her sidearm and radio. Dane said June comes. The veterinarian looked up. If we reach Ruthie first, she may need immediate care. Rollins objected, but June already had her coat on. I am not asking permission from a man who sent a laboring dog into a blizzard, she said. They left in 2 snowmobiles, Dane driving the lead machine with June behind him and Lauren following. Walter's hunting cut began behind an abandoned church, where the trail narrowed between spruce trees and climbed toward the ridge. Snow struck Dane's goggles in hard grains. The headlight illuminated only the next 20 feet. He rode slower than his body wanted. At the first fork, he stopped and studied the drifts. The left trail looked clearer. The right appeared untouched. Lauren pulled beside him. Which way? Dane shut off the engine. Through the wind came the faint pulse of a diesel motor. 6 beats. A skipped cycle. Then 6 again. The annex generator Marin had said missed every 7th cycle, but the sound was moving. Victor's truck used the same aging generator to heat the livestock box. Right, Dane said. Lauren looked at the unbroken snow. No tracks. Wind filled them. What makes you sure? The engine. She listened and heard it too. They took the right trail. 2 miles later, the forest opened above Aldercut. The old bridge lay below them, a narrow span of timber and steel over a ravine filled with black spruce. Snow covered the planks. A hinged gate stood at the eastern approach, secured by a rusted chain. Victor's truck appeared on the western ridge. Its headlights flashed through trees. Dane accelerated downhill. He reached the gate first, cut the snowmobile across the road, and pulled Walter's brass keyring from his pocket. None of the keys fit the chain lock. Lauren dismounted. Move. She fired 1 round into the lock housing. The chain fell. Together, they swung the gate across the bridge and secured it with the snowmobile tow cable. June set her medical kit behind a concrete abutment. The truck emerged from the trees and stopped 40 yards away. For several seconds, only the generator and storm could be heard. Then Victor stepped from the cab. He wore no hat. Snow settled in his gray hair. One hand remained inside the open door. Chief Mercer, he called. I knew Walter would lead you here. Dane stood behind the snowmobile, radio in hand. State police are coming from both sides. They are 20 minutes away. You have a dog in labor. I have veterinary supplies at the annex. June Calder is here. Victor looked toward the abutment and saw her. His face tightened. Owen Pike climbed out on the passenger side. He carried a bolt cutter, not a weapon, but held it like one. Lauren drew her sidearm and identified herself. Put the cutter down and step away from the truck. Owen looked at Victor. Victor said, do what she says. Owen lowered the cutter, but did not release it. A low bark came from inside the livestock box. Dane heard strain in it. Ruthie, he called. The box shook once. Victor glanced back. That name is not yours to use. It was Eleanor's before you buried it. Victor's expression hardened. Eleanor could not keep herself upright. Ruthie was wasted in that house. She was working. She was sleeping beside an old woman while veterans waited 2 years for dogs. So, you declared her dead and bred her. I reassigned an asset. The words carried across the bridge. Lauren's body camera recorded them. Dane kept his voice level. You sent Eleanor ashes. Victor looked at him with open irritation now, as if moral outrage were a luxury he had outgrown. I sent her closure. Had I told her Ruthie was being transferred, she would have sued, delayed the process, and dragged the program through the press. We were weeks from losing a federal grant. How many dogs? Victor did not answer. Walter counted 9 false deaths. Walter counted everything except the number of people we kept alive. Owen shifted closer to the bridge chain. Lauren raised her weapon. Drop the cutter. He did. The tool sank into the snow. Inside the truck, Ruthie cried out. June stepped from behind the abutment. Victor, listen to me. That dog may have an obstructed puppy. Every minute matters. She will be treated at the annex. The annex is 18 miles away. Then open the bridge. June pointed to the livestock box. Open the truck and let me examine her. Victor's gaze moved from June to Dane, then to Lauren's camera. He understood the trap. Refuse medical aid and expose himself. Accept it and lose control of the dog. He chose control. No, Dane heard sirens faintly beyond the western ridge. Victor heard them too. He reached into the cab. Lauren shouted hands. The truck lurched forward. Victor had left it in gear and was leaning through the open door to steer. The front bumper struck the gate. Timber groaned. The tow cable snapped from the snowmobile, whipping across the road. Lauren pulled June behind the abutment. Dane jumped clear as the snowmobile toppled. The gate swung halfway open. The truck surged onto the bridge. For 1 second, Victor had won. Then the right front tire broke through a rotten plank. The truck dropped to its axle and slammed sideways against the rail. The livestock box tilted over the ravine. Ruthie's crate crashed against the interior wall. Owen ran toward the woods. Lauren pursued him, ordering him to stop. Dane reached the truck. Victor was on the driver's side trying to climb into the cab in reverse. Don't move it, Dane said. You'll roll the box? Victor swung down and shoved him. Dane absorbed the force and stepped back rather than strike. Help me get the dog out. You did this, Victor said. The bridge did this. Help her. Victor reached for the cab again. Dane caught his wrist, turned him away from the door, and pinned his forearm against the truck without injuring it. Victor fought hard, stronger than his age suggested. His boots slipped on the snow-covered plank. You think restraint makes you better than me, Victor hissed. No, Dane held him until Rollins arrived from the western side with 2 troopers. The sheriff handcuffed Victor and pulled him away from the truck. Owen was brought back moments later, bleeding from a fall, but otherwise unhurt. June climbed into the tilted livestock box with Dane supporting the door. Ruthie lay inside a steel crate, the blue leash fragment beneath one paw. Her abdomen contracted hard. A dark sac showed at the birth canal, but no puppy followed. Obstruction, June said. We need her level and warm. The bridge would not hold a rescue truck. They could not move Victor's vehicle without risking a roll. Dane studied the steel crate mounting. 4 bolts secured it to the floor. Can we carry the crate? Not at this angle. He found Victor's bolt cutter in the snow, cut the rear restraint straps, and used the truck's cargo winch to stabilize the crate. Rollins and 2 troopers braced the box while Dane removed the bolts with a socket wrench from the emergency kit. No miracle occurred. No burst of impossible strength. The work took 12 minutes, and every minute Ruthie panted harder. When the crate came free, 6 people formed a line across the bridge. Dane and Rollins carried the front. June and a trooper supported the rear. Lauren guided their footing. Marin, who had arrived with the second convoy, walked beside Ruthie, speaking her name. At the eastern abutment, June opened the crate. Ruthie tried to rise and failed. Dane knelt near her head. She saw him, then pushed the blue strap toward his hand. "I'm here," he said. June worked behind him. "Keep her focused forward." Marin blankets. "Lauren, call the clinic and tell them we need surgery ready." Ruthie's paw pressed against Dane's wrist through another contraction. He did not tell her to stand down. He did not give any command at all. He stayed where she could see him. June freed the obstructed puppy moments later, small and still. She cleared its airway, rubbed its chest, and listened. Nothing. Ruthie whined and tried to turn. June continued working. The puppy coughed once. Then again, a thin cry rose beneath the storm. Ruthie's ears lifted. Dane closed his eyes for half a second. 3 more puppies were delivered during the transport to June's clinic. 2 required oxygen. A 5th was born after midnight. The 6th did not survive. Ruthie lay exhausted beneath warming blankets while the living pups pressed against her side. Victor sat handcuffed in an interview room at the substation. His recorded statements at the bridge, the hidden kennel fraudulent death files, extracted chips, and vehicle tracker records formed the case he had spent years believing no one could assemble. His own need to control every movement had connected it all. At 2 in the morning, Rollins found Dane outside the clinic. Snow had stopped. The porch light shone across a parking lot carved with tire tracks. "Your senior chief called the station," Rollins said. Dane looked at him. "I told him you were a material witness in an active felony investigation and that you followed every instruction I gave tonight. Every instruction after ignoring the first 3. I left that out." Dane almost smiled. Rollins handed him the brass lighter. Dane had dropped it on the bridge. "Walter gave me that," once the sheriff said. "The night he thought you were in Syria. Made me promise to return it when you came home. I was not in Syria. I know that now." Dane closed the lighter in his fist. Through the clinic window, Ruthie lifted her head from the blankets. Eleanor sat in a chair beside her. The old woman raised 2 fingers and snapped once. She stopped before the second snap, unable to finish. Ruthie rose despite June's protest, crossed the short distance, and placed her head in Eleanor's lap. The command was no longer necessary. 6 weeks after the bridge at Aldercut, Victor Hale sat beneath fluorescent lights in the Franklin County Administrative Building and listened to Eleanor Price describe the day she received a wooden urn filled with someone else's ashes. The public hearing room had once been a courtroom. The judge's bench remained, though the state licensing panel now occupied it. Folding chairs filled every aisle. Veterans sat beside former Homefront employees, donors, reporters, and families who had driven across 3 states after learning that dogs listed as dead might still be alive. Dane stood against the back wall. He wore his dark service uniform because he had come directly from a formal review at his command, but he had removed his cover and held it beneath one arm. He had no place at the witness table. The story unfolding there did not belong to him. Eleanor sat with her cane across her knees. Ruthie lay beside her, wearing no vest, no chain, and no identification tag. The fur around her neck had begun to grow over the scars. When Eleanor's hand trembled, Ruthie rested her muzzle against it without being told. Victor watched the dog more often than he watched the panel. His attorney had advised him not to testify. Victor had ignored the advice. "The urn was never intended as cruelty," he said when the panel chair asked him to respond. "It was intended to prevent further trauma to a vulnerable client." Eleanor turned toward him. "You decided grief would be kinder than truth." Victor folded his hands on the table. "I decided one dog could serve more than one person. She was not a piece of equipment. No, she was a trained resource created with charitable funds." Ruthie's ears moved at the sound of his voice, but she did not retreat. Eleanor kept one hand on her shoulder. The panel chair, a retired judge named Margaret Sloan, looked over her glasses. "Mr. Hale, are you suggesting that a service dog placement grants your organization the right to reclaim the animal, falsify its death, remove its identifying chip, and breed it repeatedly?" "I am saying the organization retained a reversionary interest under the contract. Your own counsel has conceded that the contract contained no such clause. The written contract was incomplete." Judge Sloan glanced at the evidence table. "Your financial records were not." Behind Victor sat 3 file boxes taken from the hidden lower wing. Each contained breeding logs, sedative purchases, transportation, invoices, and donor reports. The vehicle tracking system had preserved every trip to the Jackman Annex. Victor had installed it to ensure employees could not use company trucks without permission. It showed the same vehicles carrying dogs north on dates when death certificates claimed they were traveling south to veterinary clinics. Maren Holt testified next. She did not present herself as a hero. When the state attorney asked why she had remained at Homefront after suspecting abuse, she answered without looking at Victor. Because I thought staying near the records made me useful. Sometimes it did. Sometimes it made me an excuse for not doing enough. Victor leaned toward his microphone. You stole confidential data. Judge Sloan told him to remain silent. Maren looked at him then. I copied records after every internal report disappeared. You knew I had concerns. You kept me because you thought fear made me manageable. It made you employed. No, Maren said. It made me late. The room went still. Dane saw her hand shake as she placed Walter's ledger on the evidence table. Rollins sat 2 rows behind her, his gray mustache hiding whatever expression he made. The state attorney called Victor's former transport manager. Owen Pike entered in county clothing and ankle restraints. He had accepted a plea agreement in exchange for testimony and access codes to the annex servers. He looked smaller than Dane remembered from the porch. Owen described removing microchips, switching collars, and moving dogs before inspections. He admitted that Victor ordered Ruthie transferred during the propane alarm and told him to drive north before the amended warrant arrived. Victor's attorney objected repeatedly. Owen continued, Mr. Hale said no one would believe a dog over paperwork. Victor struck the table with one palm. I gave you a job when no kennel would hire you. And you reminded me every day, Owen said. That outburst did what hours of documents could not. The people who had defended Victor because of his good work saw the bargain at the center of his organization. Gratitude converted into obedience, charity converted into ownership. At noon, the licensing panel recessed. Victor was allowed to confer with his attorney in a side room. As deputies led him past the back wall, he stopped in front of Dane. You lost your rotation for this, Victor said. Dane had received the final decision that morning. He would not deploy with his team during the upcoming cycle. His late return failure to communicate promptly and involvement before law enforcement took control had resulted in a formal letter of caution and temporary reassignment to a training command. It was not the destruction Victor wanted it to be, but it was not nothing. I lost a rotation because of choices I made, Dane said. Victor looked toward Ruthie. And what did you gain? Dane followed his gaze. Eleanor was kneeling beside Ruthie while Maren showed her a photograph of the 5 surviving puppies. June stood behind them arguing with Rollins about whether cafeteria coffee legally qualified as coffee. Nothing that belongs to me, Dane said. Victor gave a bitter laugh. Then you are a fool. Maybe. The deputy guided Victor onward. The panel returned after 1 hour. Judge Sloan read the findings into the record. Homefront Guardians lost its operating and breeding licenses immediately. The organization's assets were placed under court supervision. All dogs from the hidden annex would receive independent medical evaluation, identity testing, and placement review. Records were referred to state and federal prosecutors for fraud, theft, animal cruelty, and obstruction charges. Victor's personal certification was revoked permanently. He did not react until Judge Sloan addressed the death notifications. Every family who received false information will be contacted by an independent team. No former Homefront officer, employee, or donor will control that process. Victor stood. You will destroy the placements, he said. You will tear dogs away from stable homes because a file has the wrong name. No, Judge Sloan replied. We will ask the people affected what justice looks like to them. That is the choice you denied them. Victor's shoulders lowered for the first time. The deputies moved beside him. He looked at Eleanor. Ruthie helped fund dogs for 18 veterans. Eleanor rose with one hand on her cane and the other on Ruthie's back. Then you should have asked whether we were willing to help, she said. You did not ask because you knew the answer would limit you? Victor was escorted from the room. No one applauded. The absence of applause gave the moment more weight. This was not a victory clean enough for celebration. Several dogs remained unidentified. 2 had medical conditions that could not be reversed. One veteran learned that the dog he had mourned for 4 years had died only months earlier at the annex. Truth returned choices, but it did not return time. Ruthie watched the door close behind Victor. Then she turned away from it and rested her head against Eleanor's leg. 3 months later, the old Homefront property no longer carried Victor's name. The public kennel became North Star Canine Trust, a small nonprofit governed by veterinarians, veteran recipients, and community members. No donor could sit on the board without an equal number of dog handlers and animal welfare representatives. Every transfer record could be reviewed by the person paired with the dog. Every retirement required independent veterinary approval. Marin refused the director's position. She accepted the role of records coordinator instead. "I have had enough of being in charge of things I cannot see," she told Dane. June served on the medical committee and complained at every meeting that committees were where useful hours went to die. Rollins became the law enforcement liaison, which mostly meant he drank coffee in the kennel office and asked irritating questions before anyone else could. Walter's ledger sat in a glass case near the entrance, open to the page marked R17. Beneath it, a small card read, "Questions are not proof. They are where responsibility begins." Dane disliked the wording because it sounded like something his father would have enjoyed too much. He left it unchanged. The 5 surviving puppies grew in a foster room overlooking the pine field. They were named Cedar Harbor, June, Bug Walter, and Grace. June objected to Junebug for 3 days before admitting she had secretly chosen it. Ruthie visited the litter every morning. She was not a sentimental mother. She inspected each puppy, corrected the loudest one with a low rumble, then stole whatever towel Dane had used and carried it to the far corner. On the day the trust opened to the public, more than 200 people came through the gates. Some were veterans seeking dogs. Some had donated to Homefront and wanted to understand how they had been deceived. Several brought old files asking whether animals listed as deceased could be traced. Eleanor sat beneath a canvas canopy with Ruthie beside her. She told visitors the truth without polishing it. Ruthie had been taken. Ruthie had been used. Ruthie had returned with scars and habits Eleanor did not understand yet. Some nights the dog still woke and searched the room for a door that was not locked. Some mornings Eleanor still reached toward the urn before remembering it had been removed from the mantel. Healing had not erased either reflex. It had given them somewhere to place it. Dane remained near the parking area, directing cars away from the muddy shoulder. His temporary assignment in Virginia allowed him 2 weekends a month in Maine while the estate was settled. He spent those weekends repairing fences and avoiding any title the new board tried to give him. A retired Marine named Calvin Ross approached with a cane and a young black shepherd at his side. "You Mercer?" Depends who is asking. "Man who held up traffic for a dog." That description includes half the county. Calvin looked toward Eleanor. "She says you found Ruthie." "Ruthie found the porch." "Same difference." No, Dane watched the dog move through the crowd beside Eleanor. "It isn't." At 2 in the afternoon, Marin carried a cardboard box onto the small platform outside the kennel office. Conversations quieted. Inside the box were 26 blue retirement tags. Families and former handlers had been invited to take the tags connected to their dogs, whether those dogs had been recovered, confirmed dead, or remained missing. No speeches were planned. Marin read each code and name. Some people stepped forward. Others could not. When she called R17, Eleanor remained seated. Dane assumed she had not heard. Then Eleanor looked toward him. "Daniel." The name carried across the yard in the same tone Walter had used when Dane was a boy and had left tools in the rain. Dane walked to the platform. Marin held out the tag. He shook his head. "It belongs to Eleanor." Eleanor called back. "It belongs to what was done to Ruthie. I do not want it on her." Dane looked at the scratched blue metal in Marin's hand. "What should I do with it?" Eleanor rested her palm on Ruthie's head. "Put it where your father can stop worrying about it." That evening, after the last visitor left, Dane drove to the small cemetery above Rangeley Lake. Walter's grave lay beneath a maple tree, the soil still dark where winter had receded. Dane pressed tag R17 into the earth beside the temporary marker. He did not speak. Rollins stood 20 yards away with his hat in his hands. Marin and June waited near the truck. Eleanor remained at the trust with Ruthie and the puppies. Dane appreciated that no one came closer. He touched the brass lighter once, then left it in his pocket. The finest moment of the day happened without him. Back at North Star, Eleanor opened the gate to the puppy room. Ruthie stepped inside and lay down. 5 young dogs climbed over her legs. Veterans and foster families sat in a wide circle, not choosing puppies yet, simply allowing the animals to move among them. Grace, the smallest, crossed the room and fell asleep on the boot of a woman who had not slept through a full night in 9 years. No one announced a placement. No one called it a miracle. Eleanor watched from the doorway while Ruthie rested among the people who would care for what came next. Dane saw the scene only later in a photograph Marin sent him. He was glad the frame did not contain him. 2 weeks after the opening, his orders came through. He would report to the training command in Virginia on Monday and remain there through the end of the year. The assignment felt at first like a room with no windows. He had built his life around operational work, teaching younger sailors how to plan, communicate, and recognize when confidence had become isolation seemed uncomfortably close to being taught the lesson himself. He accepted the orders without appeal. On Sunday evening, he packed Walter's Ford outside the old house on Loon Road. The realtor's sign had been removed. Dane had decided not to sell yet. He told himself the market was poor. June told him he was a bad liar. Snowmelt dripped from the porch roof. The storm damage had been repaired, but one gouge remained on the bottom step where Ruthie's chain had dragged across the wood. Dane left it there. He carried the last box to the truck and returned for his coat. Ruthie stood on the porch. Eleanor's car was parked near the road, but she had remained inside to give the dog time. Ruthie had come for a final visit after her veterinary appointment. Dane sat on the top step. For a while, neither of them moved. Ruthie smelled the old gouge in the wood. Then she walked to Dane and placed her head on his snow-damp boot. He rested one hand behind her notched ear. No collar stood between his palm and her skin. After a minute, Ruthie lifted her head. She took his right glove from beside him, carried it to the center of the porch, and placed it over the gouge left by the chain. Then she looked at him. Dane understood the exchange. He reached into his coat and took out the blue leash fragment. Eleanor had cleaned it and completed the missing letters in fresh white thread. Ruthie, Price. Dane laid it beside the glove. Ruthie smelled both objects, selected the leash, and carried it down the steps. At the car, she stopped and looked back once. Dane did not call her. He did not need her to choose him again. Ruthie climbed into the passenger seat beside Eleanor. The car pulled away through the pines. Dane remained on the porch until the taillights disappeared. Then he picked up his glove, entered the house, and turned off each lamp. At the front door, he paused. He left the porch light burning. Ruthie covered the scar in Walter's porch with Dane's glove, then carried her own restored leash home to Eleanor. That small exchange held the truth the people around her had struggled to learn. Care is not ownership, and love does not require being chosen over everyone else. Sometimes the bravest thing is to return what was never ours, accept the cost of our mistakes, and leave a light burning for the people and animals who may still find their way home. If Ruthie's journey stayed with you, share the story with someone who believes loyalty should always come with compassion.